So U.S. Senate Democrats are already promising that there will be another U.S. government shutdown in January of 2026, as they are willing to once again use U.S. government employees as pawns in their political game of chicken with Republicans. And one of those groups hardest hit in the last and record-long U.S. government shutdown in 2025 was the U.S. air traffic controllers. And it's that threat and other future uncertainty that is causing American air traffic controllers to seek employment elsewhere. And that elsewhere is all the way on the other side of the world. All the way down in the land of Oz.
Maximus!
American air traffic controller Chris Dickinson said he was absolutely shocked after he took an impromptu tour of an air traffic control tower in Sydney, Australia. He said controllers there worked 36-hour weeks on average and seemed happy rather than stressed. And not only that, he added they even had more weekends free than their U.S. counterparts. Dickinson said it's absolutely disgusting how much better their lifestyles are than ours. Dickinson, who spent 13 years working in the U.S. as an air traffic controller, was on a trip to Sydney, Australia 2 years ago when he was given the opportunity to see how the other half lived down under, when he got the chance to tour the Sydney ATC operation. As a matter of fact, Chris Dickinson loved it so much that he left the U.S. and moved the wife, the dog, and the kids down under to Sydney, where he is now working in that very relaxed and non-stressed control tower today. And as you probably already guessed, just like going to McDonald's, he's loving it. And he's not alone. Dickinson is among dozens of controllers from the U.S. leaving their ATC jobs, opting to direct air traffic in Australia instead. Seduced by the prospects of a less stressful and more rewarding work environment, among a host of other reasons, the move is seen as a win-win for the controllers as well as Australia. According to a recent Wall Street Journal article on the subject, based on interviews with a dozen current and former U.S. air traffic controllers, morale among U.S. air traffic controllers has eroded and has been eroding for decades. Frustration has mounted over challenging workloads and a salary that they say has lagged behind the rate of inflation. Additionally, many say that January's deadly mid-air collision at Ronald Reagan Washington's National Airport, along with persistent technology outages and the recent government shutdown that left them working without pay for weeks, was the final straw. But these recent incidents aren't new. However, they are just the latest in the history of the American air traffic control machine. And the Federal Aviation Administration has long struggled with the low staffing levels in control towers and facilities. And recently, in 2025, the FAA even began offering extra pay to help entice retirement-eligible controllers to stay on board, while raising wages for early career employees and stepping up recruitment to the Air Traffic Controller Academy. However, now with yet another government shutdown looming in 2026, the FAA will continue to struggle to find new recruits or experienced controllers willing to put up with the stress and aggravation. However, Australia wants Americans to know that it isn't specifically trying to poach U.S. air traffic controllers from one of its closest allies. And a spokesman from Air Services Australia, the government-owned entity that manages air traffic, said that so far only 5 controllers from the U.S. have fully completed its training process since September of 2024. However, that number may rise exponentially in 2026. That's because Air Services Australia expects to add 100 controllers to its ranks, 36 of whom are from the U.S. But Air Services Australia, which currently employs just over 1,000 controllers, declined to say exactly how many additional applications it has received from U.S. controllers. However, the spokesman did add that qualified controllers are welcome to apply from any country. But meanwhile, back in the U.S., according to an FAA spokeswoman, the FAA has hired 2,026 new controllers in the latest fiscal year, bringing its workforce of controllers and trainees to roughly 13,000, adding that departures to a single overseas employer make up only a very small fraction of normal attrition. But according to the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, the National Aerospace System faces a shortage of about 3,800 controllers, and that shortage continues to put a strain on U.S. air traffic controllers. And as a result of that shortage, more than 41% of controllers work 10-hour days, 6 days a week. But the ATC union representatives said that it's understandable that morale is low. But the union also declined to comment on departures to Australia. However, he did say that during the 43-day government shutdown, air traffic controllers and other aviation safety professionals were used as pawns in a political fight that had nothing to do with them. Air Services Australia manages 29 control towers across the country and has been accepting applications from foreign-based controllers since September 2024 under a labor agreement that allows it to sponsor controllers applying from overseas, and the current application process period closes in June of 2026. In its hiring materials, Air Services Australia touts a balance between work and leisure. Whether you're unwinding on our gorgeous beaches or exploring our national parks or embracing a vibrant city life, Australia offers something for everyone. Current and former FAA controllers say the Air Services Australia hiring effort is circulating widely through the workforce. Between Reddit and then word of mouth, Christian Van Deur Jr., a retired air traffic controller in Fort Mill, South Carolina, says, "I think pretty much everybody knows about it." And 29-year-old Austin Brewis, who worked at an FAA control facility in Elgin, Illinois, resigned in September to work instead for Air Services Australia. He said he felt worn down from 60-hour work weeks with staggered schedules that would have him starting and finishing work at different times throughout the week. Some controllers refer to this shift schedule as the rattler, due to its potential to disrupt their sleep rhythms and negatively impact their mental health. That grinds you down after years of doing it, Brewis said. Since FAA controllers bid for days off based on seniority, Brewis said he wouldn't have been able to have weekends off regularly for at least a decade. As a controller in Sydney, he said he would be guaranteed some weekends off every year, since Australia has a rotating shift schedule. Brewis had applied for the job in May and received an offer letter the first week of June. He'd been earning about $145,000 in Chicago, and he said his new job had a starting salary of $206,000 Australian, or about $137,000 US dollars. In his training class of 10 people, Brewis said 8 were Americans, including 2 others from his former facility in Illinois. After the U.S. government shutdown began with controllers required to work without pay, he said 5 U.S. controller acquaintances messaged him asking him about the jobs in Australia. But the man with whom we begin our story, Mr. Dickinson, who now works in Melbourne, said he and his wife were unsure at first about moving halfway across the world. While he used to worry about anxiety or depression, he said those symptoms are long gone. 8 months after leaving his FAA controller job, he has lost 20 unwanted pounds, he said. During Thanksgiving, Dickinson and his family gathered with the families of 2 other former FAA controllers from Albuquerque, New Mexico and Denver. Worst case scenario, he said, we can always come back. Dickinson told his wife, the FAA is always going to be short of controllers. Well, ain't that the truth? Well, I tell you this, if I were a U.S. air traffic controller right now, I would absolutely apply for a job in Australia. Seriously, that is a win-win situation. So now it's your turn. What do you think about this air traffic controller situation in the U.S. and Australia? Because I have fantastic subscribers in both countries. So please be sure, as always, to let me know down below.